Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to a recent reading wrap-up for February and March. So this month I kind of stagnated a little bit into a reading slump because I read a lot of adult fantasy back-to-back on audiobook, and that kind of put me in a really weird reading mood. So the first things I read this month, I ended up finishing off the Black Prism series with The Blinding Knife, The Broken Eye and Blood Mirror. One of the things I was really surprised about was the fact that this was 9 hours shorter than book 3 on audiobook, which I found really strange. It was like maybe Brent Weeks was leaving all of the climactic stuff for the last book that comes out in September, I believe. I'm going to find it really hard to talk about each of these 3 books individually because I did read them back to back, so they all kind of blurred together, but I found that this series kind of plateaued a little bit. I did give the first book 5 out of 5 stars because it just kept rolling with the punches and it kept bringing the action to the forefront of the story, but in the follow-ups it became a lot more political, which is usually fine and that doesn't bother me at all, but I just wasn't as invested in the characters as I really wished I could be. But I do believe that 2 of my favourite characters, Kip and Tia, had a lot of growth in these books. Kip in the first book is very frustrating and just not very insightful and pretty stupid, but as he goes on through the series he really grows as a character and he really tends to understand people around him more, and he makes decisions based on feelings that he takes into account rather than just powering through and making decisions because he can and screwing the consequences. So each of the books in this series, books 2, 3 and 4, I gave 4 to 4.5 stars as a rating for each book. So I can't really say anymore that this is one of my favourite fantasy series when I only gave the first book 5 out of 5 stars. That said though, I did really enjoy it, and the things that really keep me hooked about this series is the fact that I don't know what's going to happen, and I like Kip as a character, and also the magic and the world building in this series is absolutely incredible. I love the magic system and how it revolves around colour and how a magic user can use this magic and it has a toll on their lifespan. It's got a really heavy toll for each magic user, and that's what I really love about this series. So obviously I'm going to continue this and I'll read the 5th book when it eventually comes out. I'm not sure if that's the last book in the series or not, but I believe it is. I haven't researched it too much because I'd only initially read the first book and I didn't want to spoil myself for anything, but I should probably go and look that up now. The next thing I read was Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan, and this is actually a sci-fi graphic novel that is written by the same author as Saga, which is one of my favourite graphic novel series. This is a sci-fi story following a couple of paper delivery girls in the 1980s, and they kind of stumble onto this really science fiction-y type of story when they discover spaceships and creatures that aren't quite human and potentially time travel as well. Apart from 2 characters blurring together at the beginning of this volume because I couldn't really tell them apart, I did really enjoy this story. It was a little bit confusing because I didn't know where the actual plot was going until kind of closer to the end, and then the last page absolutely blew my mind, so I gave this 4 out of 5 stars and I'm definitely going to be continuing it. So next up is a book that I read for Contemporary-a-thon, and it is Neverland by Margot McGovern. I do have a reading vlog for Contemporary-a-thon, but I do feel like I failed at it a little bit because of the reading slump that I've been in recently, but I did end up finishing this book, and I think it was the only one I finished for the readathon, and I gave this about a 4 out of 5 stars as well, and I did really like this one. This is an Australian contemporary young adult book, and it loosely follows the story of Peter Pan. It kind of has homages to the Peter Pan story rather than being a direct retelling, because the main character Kit, she lives on this island and has witnessed her mother and father die, and this island has become kind of a psychiatric ward for kids who are the lost ones and who have had mental struggle, and so they go there to rehabilitate and then come back to the mainland. Not healed, that's the wrong word, but I guess feeling a lot better and having the right care and treatment that they need. This has huge talks and huge triggers for suicide, eating disorders and self-harm, so if those are things that really bother you in a book, probably don't read this because this is very blunt and it doesn't really hold anything back. And while Kit doesn't suffer from all of those things that I mentioned, she does suffer from a key 1 or 2, and the friends that she has on this island suffer from the others, so all of those things are quite equally portrayed in their darkness, so definitely be aware of that before picking up Neverland. As for the plot and the voice of Kit, the plot was definitely interesting and I didn't see where it was going, and it was very well paced. I didn't really get bored and it was very easy to finish as well. And for Kit's character, I really liked that she was not condescending, she was really honest, and she didn't kind of preach to anybody about what she was going through either, which was really refreshing. Kit as a character was also given space and support in this book for what she was going through, and she had all of these people that were around her and not just pushing her to get well, they were actually wanting to invest in her time and understand her and love her and not push her away, which I found really refreshing. So yes, like I've mentioned, overall this was a really quick read. I did really enjoy it and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. So this next book I actually started for Contemporary-a-thon as well, and even though I tried getting through it on audiobook, it didn't quite connect with me regardless, and that is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. This story is about an autistic main character, and he discovers the dead body of a dog on his front lawn, and he kind of tries to investigate the dog's murder. It's just kind of about him navigating social situations and overturning mysteries that are surrounding him, and I'm not quite sure why, but maybe it was his voice or the way he was written, but I just didn't really connect with it at all. And then after I had DNF'd it, which means do not finish, after I DNF'd it, I found out that it was actually a book that people studied in school, so maybe that's why I found it a little bit dry. I don't know, it was just super short and I thought I could get through it really quickly for Contemporary-a-thon, but clearly I was wrong. I need to try and pick more books for readathons that I think I'm going to rate like 4 or 5 stars each. I really honestly had no idea what I'd think about Curious Incident, and clearly that was a mistake to add it as a readathon book because I just didn't like it at all. So next up, because I was reading so many fantasy books on audiobook, I thought about picking up a short book for a physical read. So I read Fruits Basket Volume 6, and this is a manga by Natsuki Takaya. Now, because this is volume 6, I can't really say too much about what's actually happening in this story because it's starting to take off. So because Toru is investigating these things, it's become more of a heavier story rather than just character-driven stuff, which I'm really starting to get into. This volume also did include 2 of my favourite characters, Kyo and Haru, and that probably won't mean anything to you if you haven't read this series, but those are the 2 hotheads in the book, and they're both very vocal, and I really like seeing the softer side of them, which came through in this book. So from here on out, from volume 7 onwards, I feel like this series gets a lot darker in terms of characterization and the things that Toru is going to find out about the family. So I don't really remember too much about it, which is really great because I read it like 10 years ago and I'm rereading it now. So I'm really happy that I don't remember anything, and I'm really excited to continue this series. This was another 4 out of 5 star read for me. And so the most recent book that I have read and the last book in this wrap up is actually Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This isn't the final cover, this is actually a book proof, but I'll insert the actual cover over the top of this so you can see what it looks like because it has the most amazing looking blue dragon on it. Even though I had this physical copy, I actually ended up picking this up on audiobook because I have been struggling doing physical reads recently. So I read this audiobook in a couple of weeks, and I don't really know how to accurately describe this because there was so much going on in terms of characterization and world building and actual plot that was happening. It was a lot to fit into this 800 plus page book. The characters I loved in this book were Iyad and Tane, and those are the 2 main female characters, and there was also 2 main male characters as well. And I feel like the 2 female characters were developed the most, which is why I was more invested in them. It might not have been the case, but it seemed like there were more chapters from Iyad's perspective, and so because of that I really connected with her as a character and I really was invested about where her story was going. I feel like Tane and Iyad had the most development over the course of the book, whereas the other 2 characters were very much, I don't know, I don't want to say supporting because though they went through their own struggles as well and they grew significantly as well, but I was just more interested in Tane and Iyad as characters than I was Loth and Ruse. See, I even struggled to remember their names, so I wasn't really as invested as I wanted to be. It's really hard to pin down and describe what this book is actually about because so much happens in it, but Samantha Shannon has described this as her queer female-led dragon fantasy book, and that kind of sums up pretty much all you need to know about it. But for the sake of a little bit of plot, because I didn't really know much at all going into this, we follow a few characters sprinkled over the east, west and north of this book, and we kind of track the politics of each region and how they intertwine with each other, and Iyad has a really key role in this. She's actually masquerading under the religion of the Queen, but she's not truly of that religion or of that region at all. We also have dragons of the east and west, and the wyverns can control fire and the dragons can control water, and I really like this homage to water dragons because Western dragons seem to be able to breathe fire, but Asian and East Asian dragons seem to be able to breathe water, and I really like that she brought that mythology into Priory of the Orange Tree. Overall, I did really enjoy Priory, but I wish that it was split into 2 books, not because I don't like the length, because I like the length of adult fantasy books just in general, but I feel like it did a little bit of a disservice to the story that it was just in one novel collectively. I feel like if it was split into 2, it would have given a lot more opportunity for tension and cliffhangers, whereas when I was reading this, all I got was a sense of anticipation and inevitability that this would all come to an end in the one novel. And I think that's why I wasn't as invested in character as I really wanted to be, because I was like, this is all going to wrap up in one book, I'm sure they'll be fine. So unfortunately, even though I predicted this would be a 5-star book for me, I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5-star rating. So these are all the books that I read in February and March. I'm honestly a bit sad that this number wasn't bigger, but I feel like I still hit the page count even though I didn't hit the actual number of books read count. On my overall Goodreads TBR, I now have about 130 unread books rather than over 150, so I'm slowly making headway anyway, which I'm really proud of. In the comments, please let me know what books are left on your TBR and how many of them, if you count them. I really like counting them so I know exactly how many are left and how many I need to either unhaul or read as soon as possible. But thank you so much for watching this wrap up, and I'll catch you in the comments. Bye!